Welcome to the Standard Deviations podcast, presented by Orion Advisor Solutions and hosted by Dr. Daniel Crosby, Orion's Chief Behavioral Officer and New York Times best-selling author. Each week, Dr. Crosby interviews a fascinating new guest on a range of compelling topics, from literature to psychology to financial wellness. To learn more about Dr. Crosby's behavioral finance work at Orion, visit www.orion.com.
Hello and welcome to the Standard Deviations podcast. I am your host, Dr. Daniel Crosby, and I am joined today by Tina Powell. Tina is the CEO of C-Suite Social Media, and she is a digital marketing expert. She is herself a podcaster and has a wonderful podcast called In the Suite, and she's a TEDx speaker, which I just found out about, and delivered, no spoilers, but delivered a very heart-wrenching, may I say, a very poignant TEDx speech that was all about her childhood years. So I'd encourage everyone to go check out Tina's TEDx talk. Welcome to the show.
It's an honor to be here, Daniel. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for watching the TEDx talk. That was one of the most incredible episodes of my life. It was really a bucket list item. My kids were in the audience. My brother was in the audience. My mother, who's now 80. Hi, Mom, sorry. Everybody knows your age at this point, and I wanted my mother to know how appreciative I am about her making all the decisions she did as a single parent, and I wanted my kids to also know that their growing up was a big contrast to how I grew up, and most of all, the people in the audience. I wanted them to have hope that if you're dealt a deck of cards that look to be a really bad, awful hand, that actually you can turn it around and it could be your best hand ever. And I'll never forget the girl. She was 18 years old. She came up to me directly after the talk. She handed me a little Post-it and she's like, "Thank you." And my talk gave her permission to see her life in a totally different way, Daniel. And that was one of the most incredible achievements ever.
Well, huge honor. I went, I went to watch it just as part of my due diligence, just as part of my prep for our podcast, assuming it was going to be about digital marketing or podcasting or social media, any of your many areas of expertise. And I was like getting choked up watching this, thing about your childhood. So thank you for sharing that with the world. Thank you for sharing the message that you can be, you can raise your own children different than you were raised, and that you can be, better than how you were raised to be, I guess. It's an empowering message, and one that so many people need to hear. So thank you. So I am so blessed to have, so just to set a little context here, I'm so blessed to have a social media expert here in front of me as I drink my Diet Coke, which is very much on brand for me. And I'm back. I'm back hooked. I'm sorry, folks. If you thought I had quit, I did for a minute. I'm back hooked again. I want to talk with you about the Diet Coke tweet, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're not familiar, I tweeted a joke about Diet Coke a couple of months ago. The last time I was in Utah, we're here at the Fuse conference in Utah. The last time I was in Utah, I did a tweet about Diet Coke, and it went absolutely bonkers. So here's the stats, Tina, on the tweet: 32 million impressions, 2 million engagements, 160,000 profile visits, 522,000 likes, 50,000 retweets, 6,000 comments. And I asked people, how many new followers do you think I got on the back of this? So look at this. What was it again? 32 million impressions, right? 160,000 people came to my profile. How many new followers did I get off this? And I asked a couple of people last night who were giving me a hard time about drinking Diet Coke at the party last night. And the guesses were variously 30,000, 70,000, and 50,000 new followers. I got 87 new followers. 87 new followers. That is a 0.0002% conversion rate. I am disillusioned about social media, Tina. What did I do wrong? What gives? Help me make sense of my viral moment, my extremely stupid viral moment that ended in 87 new followers.
So first of all, I really love the question. I expect it from you, Daniel, as a behavioral scientist, a researcher, a PhD, a quant with an insanely curious mind. So here's the thing. The follower metric is just one metric of success, right? And that was a conversion rate of 0.0002% conversion rate. But here's the thing, right? Is that what about your engagement rate? Let's do a little, I need you here to help me do a little bit of math, right? So you had 32 million impressions, and from that, you had 2 million engagements. So what's the conversion rate on that if we're looking at engagement rate as a metric?
Yeah, so 1/16th, whatever.
Okay, right. So a lot better though, right? We can agree that that's a lot better. And here's the thing, right? Your goal was not followers for that. You were just interacting, you were caught up in the moment. It was incredible. And so we're taking one metric, and if we define success as that one metric, you can look at it and say that you weren't successful. But I would argue with you, absolutely you are. So here's a couple of things that went through my mind. Is that number one, you have a pretty decent follower count. And I have to imagine that people looked and said, okay, hey, I'm reading something. They said, hey, Daniel's got a great how many followers are you?
32 or 33,000.
Yeah, okay, right. We feel really sorry for him right now. Only 87 followers, right? Some people might have concluded that maybe you weren't looking for new followers, right?
Right.
Okay, and here's the other thing that I want to talk about with regards to this tweet is that what did it do for top of mind awareness, right? So how many texts did you get as a result?
So that's how I knew it had happened. I was actually at a minor league baseball game with my family here in Salt Lake. Shout out to the Salt Lake City Bees. We were at a Bees game, right? And my phone starts exploding. And all these people are going, Elon Musk, OMG, Elon Musk. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And so I check, and then sure enough, Elon Musk and Elon Musk's mother had retweeted it. And that's how it had already gone fairly viral. I think 8 million people had seen it before Elon Musk did. Then he got involved, and it went, further crazy.
So you had, if we looked at engagement rate, right, we took the metrics of how many texts did Daniel receive, how many emails did Daniel receive, how many DMs did you receive, and most important, this is the most important metric at all, what did your kids and family say?
Oh, see, this is great. No, everyone loved it. And my kids told their friends, and now I'm a rock star among all the 8th graders at Northwestern Middle School in Atlanta. So yeah, the kids loved it. The family loved it. And here's the thing, it was a wholesome, it was a fine tweet, right? I think a lot of times things that go viral are edgy or inappropriate or cast a bad light on someone. And I mean, it was just sort of a funny, wholesome tweet. And I still get texts because there's this whole universe of TikTok influencers and people who are repurposing it and passing it off as their own. Right.
That's
so
fun.
It's like people basically reciting word for word what I said as if it was their idea.
So it's almost like FinTalk has created like a meme of sorts.
That's right.
Right. And you could see that, right? Because again, you're a researcher. So it would lend itself that certain things that perform well, my graduate professor, Dr. D'Amico, replicate,
yeah.
right? And so that's what people are basically doing is that they're seeing your numbers. So indeed, it was really, really a huge success. And the other thing I would say about social media is that so many people want to be in your position, Daniel,
Sure.
but they think that it's something that they can engineer. And even if you have the Dr. D'Amico replicate playbook, they're not you.
Well, so this is a great point, and one I want to pull on this thread for a minute. I had Morgan Housel on my podcast this last week. Great interview always. He sold 2 million books. And I asked him, I said, look, besides it being an awesome book, which it is, full stop, it's an incredible book. It's one of the best books on behavioral finance I've ever read. But that's sort of necessary but not sufficient for you to sell 2 million copies, because I've written good books on behavioral finance too, and they didn't sell 2 million copies, right? And so I said, what is it? And he had a couple of answers. He's been writing for 15 years. He has a huge following. But he said, look, there's an element of luck. And he even called up my tweet and he said, look, I've followed you for 10 years. You've said funny stuff before. This Coke tweet wasn't, a million times funnier than the other things you've said that didn't go viral. There's always sort of an element of chance and an element of luck. So I know people are always coming to you trying to engineer virality, right? How do I get 32 million eyeballs on my thing? And it's not that easy, right? I mean, it's not that easy.
It's not that easy. I would say that Dollar Shave Club did this really super well, right? And Michael, forgetting his last name right now, I saw him speak once, and he was actually a digital marketing graduate, right? And so, and there has been research, Daniel, done on, what makes for a viral video, what makes for a viral tweet and all of that. And he had the secret sauce, Dollar Shave Club, and then you can see a whole bunch of videos even right now. If you're subscribed to YouTube, ads that are shown to you that have that basic, it's like the hero's journey. It's like Campbell, right? It's like everything follows that kind of certain paradigm. You start low, then you get high, like standard deviations, right? Like a
Gaussian curve?
Exactly, right. Like the normal curve. I would say that the thing about social media is don't lead with that. Don't lead with that. And you didn't lead with that.
Right.
That's the key. If your goals for social media are to be of service, of to be your natural self, of just to bring you and your conversation to the fold, then good things will happen. If you try too hard to mechanically engineer sales and lead conversion and all of this stuff, social is not the tool for that.
So it's a great point, and I'm going to write a book about this one day, because it's one of the things I believe most fervently is that people have a sixth sense for authenticity, right? If you set out to create a hit factory, and I no doubt there is some hero's journey sort of replicable element to what constitutes a viral tweet. I'm sure there are some pillars of what helps, right? But if you set out to create a hit factory, I think people would kind of smell that and they would see through that. And I think part of the virality of my tweet was that it was just sort of so off the cuff, right? I mean, it wasn't, and I also think that's why I didn't get more followers. It's because people look at my other stuff and it's like, oh, it's boring, like, finance stuff. But anyway, so a follow-on question, one of the things that the most common question I got that day was, what are you going to do to monetize this? Right. And so everyone was blowing me up, right? Like, what are you going to do? Like, this is your moment in the sun. This is your Andy Warhol 15 minutes. A very dumb 15 minutes. But here's your 15 minutes. How are you going to make money off of this? And the thing that I landed on was that I'm going to do nothing, right? Because I've seen the Twitter crowd turn ugly very fast. And I've seen other viral tweets try and sell lamps or, whatever, little tchotchkes, and it just doesn't go well. People don't respond well to this sort of organic moment of virality trying to then be turned to like sell something on Amazon. And I also have seen crowds go really ugly. I mean, my comments were a mess about a completely benign, completely vanilla tweet, had people arguing about the end times and the apocalypse and the health benefits and detriments of Diet Coke. I mean, I couldn't even look at it. It was a mess. And so I said, I'm not going to link my podcast. I'm not going to link my books. I'm not going to do anything, because these people are not here to read a book about behavioral finance. They're here to laugh at a dumb Diet Coke tweet. So did I do it right? Did I do it wrong? If a client called you with a moment of virality like this and said, how do I monetize it? What would be your advice to them?
So first of all, I would say that with every client, it's about understanding them first as a person. And so we know Daniel Crosby to be very rooted in, I would say, gratitude and humanity. And I think your first response to lay low and just kind of hang out and just let things settle, that is an example of the authenticity that we're talking about on social media. Not for you to say, hey, look at me. And that monetization, I'm a firm believer that if you do good, if you're a person that does good, you'll monetize.
Yeah.
That in itself. But if that's your main goal, but here's a couple of things that I would have done in response to that, okay? And I thought about this because it's a really, really, really good question. And it's easy to sit back and reflect, right, now that some time has elapsed. But if I were you, and you could still do this, right, I think that you should sign an autographed copy of your book, The Behavioral Investor, and I think that you should send it with a handwritten personal note to Elon. Of course, I would put in some Diet Coke there, and I would go old school, right? And that's the one thing I love with social, is one of the things that we're trying to do is we are taking social and we are combining that with print. We are combining that with events. We are combining that with physicality. We're not just using social for social's sake. So I would say, how can you take the digital approach and marry it with something that has like that humanity factor that you're known for? Mm-hmm. I'm sure that he would love your book. And you don't know then, is he going to ask you to come and speak? You never know what can happen. And I'm a firm believer too on just throwing out a bow and arrow in the universe and just saying, hey, here it is. Here's an expression that's coming from my heart, from the deepest place of gratitude and appreciation for being on your radar. Here's a book. Thank you. What would happen with that? Okay. Second is this. Are you ready for the second?
I love the first one, so let's go with the second one.
Okay. The second one is that I was so happy that we were going to have this podcast episode. I was so deeply curious too, because wow, that's never happened to me or really anybody that I know. I would love for you to devote a Standard Deviations podcast with just you. Nobody else, right? You talking about the randomness and the probabilities of outliers, your thoughts, and bridging, and I even have the name for it, data, Diet Coke, and Elon Musk through the lens of a behavioral finance scientist.
Okay, I'm taking both suggestions. I'm absolutely going to, I don't know why, I'm embarrassed that I didn't think of this before. I am absolutely going to shoot my shot with Elon. Elon, if you're listening, the book is on the way, right, with a case of Diet Coke, right? Case of Diet Coke. He said he loved to watch it with buttery popcorn. He loved to watch a movie with Diet Coke and buttery popcorn. Couldn't agree more. So, Elon, the check's in the mail. The book's on the way. Absolutely love it. And that is great, right? To do a solo podcast of Standard Deviations, absolutely taking you up on that. And just, it was such a singular moment. We were just at the Future Proof conference, or no, what was it, a festival, right? They're just the Future Proof festival, not a conference. And I got asked to sign a Diet Coke. And it was one of the more hilarious moments of my life. Shout out to Aravind, who brought me the Diet Coke to sign and had someone videotape him asking me, because he's like, hey, I have something I'd like you to sign. And I was like, sure, happy to, assuming it's a book. And he pulls out a Diet Coke, and I just started dying laughing. So, right, people are still intrigued by this and intrigued by the experience of it. So, riffing off the experience of it, it was kind of, if I'm going to spoil things from my solo episode here, but we're having a good conversation here. It was a little unnerving, right?
Yeah.
And there's a saying that every day Twitter has one main character, and your job is to never be that person. I was literally the number one trending topic on Twitter for 12 hours in the States, right? BuzzFeed did articles on it. All of these other sort of content aggregators, I forget their names, did stories on my tweet and sort of adjacent tweets that came off of it. It was 1 part flattering and probably 5 parts creepy, right? And so I think, we work in finance, and when I hear objections, and you're much more plugged into this than I am, when I hear objections from advisors around getting engaged on social media, one is reliably compliance is what, what will compliance say, or, will compliance let me? The other one, though, is around reputational damage. My tweet, again, totally benign, silly, vanilla, whatever, like not going to cause any reputational harm to me. But you could see where if someone sort of stepped in it and people got a hold of it, it can go like wildfire. And there was a British marketing agency that did a whole case study on my tweet and sent it to me, which was hilarious, right?
Another thing you should share on that episode with that link.
No, absolutely. But one of the things that they talked about was, one of the reasons they claimed that my tweet went viral was because it was negative. It was basically like, hey, after years of being addicted to Diet Coke, I've quit for 3 or 4 months or whatever it was. And in that time, basically nothing good has happened, right? I don't feel better. I haven't lost weight. Nothing good has happened to me. And it was sort of a snarky, negatively slanted tweet. And they were like, that's the kind of stuff that tends to go viral. So I think advisors are worried, or financial institutions are worried that you toil for years sending out positive, upbeat tweets, and then the one time you have a bad day or say something that's amiss, that's the one that hits. What's your advice to advisors and financial institutions about this sort of negative bias that social media can have sometimes?
I think that advisors think that because they're going to be silent on social media, that protects them and safeguards them against the reputational risk of what social media can offer. And here's the thing, Daniel, I don't need your channel to discredit you. I don't need your channel. I can say what I want. I can put it on any platform I want. I could put it on Pinterest. Mm-hmm. I could put it on WhatsApp. I can put it on Facebook. And so businesses thinking that they're insulating themselves by not going on social media when they could be talking about their culture, when they could be talking about their values, when they could be talking about their principles, when they could be promoting events and things like Future Proof Festival and Fuse, where look at what's going on. Innovation, disruption, the best people here. Can you imagine if we were silent on these channels right now because we were, afraid of that? There's always a risk. You are, again, a scientist, and you know that there's no such thing as 100%. You put yourself at risk when you walk across the street. Mm-hmm. So somebody could attack you on social media the same way that they could attack you on the street. Sure. The same way that they could attack you if you're just shopping in a grocery store. And there are other really bad situations that I can think of, like humanity in the worst form. And the reality is that social media has weaponized our society. Parts of our society, we have to acknowledge that. For advisors, I would say please don't be silent. Please have a social media policy. Please have standard operating procedures, workflows, a person responsible, a point of view, a content strategy. Those are the things. Social media is not designed to be a one-hit wonder, nor is it supposed to be just a 100% hit reel. Be careful what you say, but be careful what you say in email. Be careful what you say in an annual report. Be careful what you say when you're in front of an event. Yeah. And that's what I say to that's what I say to the industry. Going back to my TEDx talk, I wish that the industry had been more vocal when I needed financial help. Yeah. When my mother needed financial help because she was a single parent, going back to earn her bachelor's, working 2 jobs, to support us. I needed financial advisors. Of course, we didn't have social media then, but now there's their chance to show up and to be of service to people. Use social to be of service. That's my message. Yeah, I love that there's so much good stuff there to unpack. Use social to be of service is kind of the headline. I loved your piece about just having an opinion. Right? I think sort of the joke among people who are, I think, social media hesitant is something like, well, what am I going to post? What I had for lunch? No, be interesting, right? Don't post what you had for lunch. Post something fascinating. You have a good idea, share it. And just because you make a great point too, that just because you're not involved on social doesn't mean social can't come to your doorstep and talk about something that you said at a conference or in an email. There's really no getting around it, so you might as well engage. But you mentioned platforms, and I want to spend a minute there because I have a really embarrassing confession to make on the Standard Deviations podcast today, which is that I love LinkedIn, right? I know that's not a cool thing to say. LinkedIn has been so good to me. I have gotten so much mileage out of this most hated, sort of most loathed, most parodied of social media platforms, but it's absolutely been a huge boon to my, exposure, selling books, connecting with people. How should financial professionals think about the different platforms? I did a little digging. TikTok was the most downloaded app of 2021. It's been downloaded 3 billion times, which is wild when you think that there's 7 billion people. That's pretty incredible. But, it's also associated with security concerns. It's also sort of associated with a level of maybe lightheartedness and unseriousness that maybe brands don't want to associate with.
how should financial professionals and financial institutions think about a platform's personality as it coincides with their own personality when trying to make those decisions?
So it goes back to the nature of their practice. And this is where I think that platforms like Orion come in, because you have the intelligence of looking at your business and your business model. And you know then who is it that you really want to serve. So the question where, is LinkedIn the platform that I should use? Is Snapchat the platform? Should we be on Pinterest? Should we be making videos for YouTube? And I would answer it like this. Who are you fundamentally trying to serve? And so you have to make the client or the prospective client or the people that you serve really the hero or the arc of your social media. So it goes back to defining the ideal client profile. For a lot of firms here, there are 37 right now here at Fuse alone, representing over $500 billion of AUM. That's a lot. Most of these firms have maybe 5 to 10 personas, ideal client profiles. So it's first understanding where you want to be. Are you attracting G2, G3? Well then, TikTok could be a platform for you, should be a platform for you. There are compliance, there's software right now, so we can archive compliance for social media. And so here's the thing, going back to your question about LinkedIn. LinkedIn offers, for every advisor, they should absolutely be on LinkedIn. It's the world's most professional network. I expect to see you there as a professional. I do as a prospective client. I want to see where you went to school, right? I want to see what you studied. I want to understand your history of work, right? We include it in a Form ADV, right? Why this is like, we're transparent about that. But I also want to understand what lights you up. I loved even just researching you. You're at Brigham Young. You are fluent in, I'm going to get this wrong, Tagalog, right? Yeah. Tagalog, like all of these interesting factors that make me appreciate you more even, Daniel, that I see that there's aspects to your personality that I'm deeply curious about. Why did you study? How has that impacted in your life? So clients want to have a deep engagement with their advisor. So that's where social media, that's where LinkedIn, and then you see the commonalities. They see, oh, you went to Brigham Young. Wow, my cousin went there, my friend went there, I know somebody. And so if advisors were smart, they could use LinkedIn as the opportunity to set some icebreaker questions on their first client meeting. They can open up the door very easily by establishing that, that mutual connection piece. But there are so many other things right now on LinkedIn. I have 93 articles. And so I'm using right now the feature, my LinkedIn newsletter goes to almost 2,000 people, everybody that I'm connected to. The first time that you launch a LinkedIn newsletter goes to every single person that you're connected to. I'm over 6,000 connections, a third of my audience opted in. But here's the thing, you don't need a huge fandom either, right? You've got 33,000 followers on Twitter. You have a massive following on social media as well, too. I think you're close to 20,000. LinkedIn has so many features that advisors should be taking advantage of, but it comes down to how the organization is staffed, who's doing that work on a regular basis. There's got to be cadence. There's got to be, compliance. You don't just launch this and decide, oh yeah, today we're going to do LinkedIn Live. Today I'm going to put a newsletter without putting any thought around content strategy, editorial calendar. Advisory firms are their own brands now. It's time for them to level up. I've been very patient, very, very patient. Firms like Orion get it. And that's why the firms that are on social, the ones that are making the most noise and not afraid to put themselves out there, those are really the leaders in the industry right now.
I liked a couple of the C words you said there, is consistency and cadence. I think a lot of what I hear from people who are frustrated with social media is, look, I posted a couple times, nothing happened, and I gave up, right? You sort of necessarily scream into the void the first couple of times you post on social media, because people have to learn what to expect from you. They have to figure out that you're there. I'm shocked when I post something on LinkedIn now. It consistently gets tens of thousands of views, which is incredible, right? But that's the result of whatever, a decade plus of consistent posting, having a relatively uniform message, right? That is interspersed 90-10, right? 90% behavioral finance and 10% Daniel as a person, right? Yesterday, I posted a picture of me and my son, right? I brought my son here to the Fuse conference for the first day. He's hanging out with grandma and grandpa now so I can work. But, I brought him here and I said on LinkedIn, normalize taking your kids on business trips. Because, I just took my daughter to Ally, one of our clients, Ally Bank in North Carolina, right? I took my daughter there. And I had her present a 15-minute presentation, my 13-year-old daughter, on the spending and investing habits of the next generation. Because the client that I work with there at Ally, it's a bunch of female executives. I wanted my daughter to see women in powerful seats doing great work, and they were so excited to have her come. And so you can share a message like that on LinkedIn. It's humanizing. People get to know you. Speak Tagalog. Here's where you went to school. Here's what your kids look like. And then 90% of it, right, is all around the message. So you got to have the consistency. You got to have the cadence if you want to have the results. I think you're spot on.
And the other thing I would add too is that it's all about providing value. There's the lifetime value of a client. And there's also too, are you providing in your social providing value? When I saw your post this morning with Liam in a pool, and that you were proposing, you don't know now, right? Because our attribution methods are flawed. You don't know what advisor is going to take action the next time that he or she goes on a business trip to say to their kids and their family, hey, you know what? Why don't you come along? Or taking your Charlotte to that presentation, right? And then what I see is a story much more about the values that you have. Again, family, empowerment, culture, right? That's not only describing the culture of your household, describing the culture of Orion. That I find very aspirational. So it's not just like, hey, here it is, look at my kids. You're planting seeds of greatness now in me that I'm a parent, right? I'm a parent. I would have loved to have seen that. And, there were opportunities that maybe I didn't have as a parent, being, when my kids were born, but now I'm more likely to do something as a result. That's the power of social media. We forget the inspirational, the aspects of just leading a really good life. So many people want to go to the 10% of the bad. Yeah, you know what? Society is the same way.
Yeah.
Right? And so I really applaud you as a parent, as a father and a husband, that you put that out there, because I think that's a model for other advisors to follow. You don't have to share everything.
Sure.
Just share what comes natural and share what's comfortable, but certainly tie it back. Provide that correlation in your messaging to what that means in business. I put out a post last night on LinkedIn. It took me over an hour to do it. I had notes from my iPhone. I had to build I wanted to build a photo collage. I didn't want to say, hey, here we are at Fuse, yeah. You know what? I wanted the people who couldn't be here, who want to be here, right, to say, what were the 5 things that I heard?
Yeah.
And it was all about Daniel. That post was not about me.
Yeah.
It was about my audience, because you have to really, truly care about what it is. Use that as your litmus test. Is this bringing value to somebody? Is this an ego thing that I'm doing, or is this a servant thing I'm doing?
Yeah, I think I always want to try and find the name of the podcast, right? Sort of in conversation it emerges, and I think the name of the podcast might be of service, right? I mean, that's what social media is all about. When I think about the best content creators and the best social media accounts, when I came to the world of finance, I mean, remember, my PhD is in clinical psychology. I didn't know a lick about finance. When I first started working in this world, 13 years ago.
I went back. I went on Google Scholar to look at your dissertation, by the way.
Let's never speak about my dissertation. This is a family show.
And I watched part of your TEDx talk as well, too.
Good, yes.
Yeah.
Go watch the TEDx talk.
Yeah, it is really interesting. It's awesome. Relationships and love. I love it.
Yeah. But, I learned from the generous contributions of people, I'm going to leave out a million names, right? But people like Wes Gray and Michael Batnick and, Nick Majuli and like all these smart people who are sharing, many of whom have been guests now, right? But are sharing their wisdom. I mean, I learned at their feet, like in a very real way, and they were of service to me, and I'll never forget that. I can never thank them enough for that. And that's why these folks I just named sell a lot of books, have big follower counts. It's because they're good, right? I mean, I think social media is in many ways a meritocracy. Like if you put out good stuff consistently, the followers will come. That was another thing in our Morgan, my episode with Morgan, he talked about his former employer bringing in a social media expert, and it was like all these hacks and shortcuts about, post it Tuesdays at 8:35 or whatever, and that's the way to get it. And I'm sure there's some truth to that. But at the base of that is make great work, right? Like be of service, share great things,
right.
Spend an hour. Who spends an hour? Only Tina Powell. Like who spends an hour crafting the perfect LinkedIn message that will resonate with the thousands of people who follow you? That's how you get there.
I mean, everything is brand too right now, Daniel.
Sure.
And so it's like your choice of emoji is brand. How I write that is brand. And brand is so huge. And the people that you just mentioned, part of the reason is because, and you have a really strong personal brand, and you get it. Mm-hmm. And brand is also something that advisors really, really need to pay attention to. So again, social, even the look and feel of what you say is part of that overall branding strategy.
Yeah, right on. Absolutely. So last question before we get to the lightning round, which I'm super excited about. So you talked about your mom. I thought that was very sort of pressing. You talked about your mom, and the next question is how can we reach folks, right? How can we reach everyday folks and keeping with the theme of this podcast, be of service to our consumers? So 72% of Americans and 93% of internet users use social media every day. And this is embarrassing. The average time spent internationally is 2.5 hours. That average time spent domestically is 2 hours and 15 minutes. Americans being a model of restraint, only spending 2 hours a day on social media. What needs to be done to, better educate the investing and saving and spending public, from the seats of privilege that we have with some know-how? How can we better, educate the investing public? And how can we eventually grow these into leads or real connections?
So on the education side, and I'll take it back to what you said before was brilliant, and that is to make great content. And that's what you have to lead with. You have to put a lot of time and effort into that content. And again, does that match the audience that you want to attract? So, educating a 15-year-old, educating a 50-year-old, and educating a 25-year-old. You also have to look at, I think advisors could take a page out of healthcare, pharmaceutical, sports. I love looking at sports for inspiration for social media. And that is that how are they constructing those messages? So a lot of what we do in finance, and I love us all, right? And I appreciate the work that goes into a heavily researched white paper. I really do. And I think that that's an audience for a sophisticated advisor. If you're trying to appeal to the general public, and that's why platforms like TikTok and Instagram work so well, because am I a visual learner? What kind of learner am I? And now I can see that. If I'm a visual learner, then that's why we also tell clients to make sure that their content is in lots of different formats. Right now, podcasting is huge. There are still firms that are really against that. You want to educate, you want to appeal to new audiences, then you should have a podcast. And what we get is a lot of pushback still, and this is where it fuses. This is about innovation and disruption. And I say to those people, Daniel, if you were starting your own business today, would you look at the amount of websites there are and say, oh, you know what, we're not going to have a website. There's just too much competition about that. So you really have to do everything in your power. Throw jello, and see what sticks with your audience, right? And you're a researcher, so you understand more than anybody here how to survey your audience. Is this working? And again, there's so many analytics behind these platforms that you can, from a quantitative aspect, you can measure that, but also too, from a qualitative aspect, you can see the people who like your stuff on Facebook and LinkedIn. Hey, Joyce, thanks really much for, liking that. What did I do that really resonated? What would you like to see more of? So, we have to poll our own audiences that right now, our own clients that are the biggest and best source of referrals, of more share of wallet, of all of the lead gen. Produce great content. That's your best lead gen strategy. Social is a byproduct. Social is just, hey, I'm shining a micro light on something macro that you did, right? So micro, let's use Liam in the pool, right? You made, that was a micro moment of a macro decision, bringing my whole family here, bringing the grandparents here, organizing my trip and work around that. Yesterday, my post too, just a micro light on a macro theme.
Mm-hmm. So, it's incredible. We'll go back to cadence and consistency. This podcast, right? You're 73 episodes
73
deep.
And
You are. You said
yeah,
so that's quite an accomplishment.
It's hard. It's really hard.
It is hard, right? So we're 200 and something episodes.
Wow.
In, right? And
yeah, I think you're 273 or 5, or by the time this podcast launches, you're probably over 300.
Yeah, it's getting there. So but this is like we're in the top, half of 1% of most downloaded podcasts internationally.
It's huge, Daniel.
But
huge.
the thing is, the tails are so fat. It's not like my numbers are so huge. It's just cadence and consistency, right? You've taught people what to expect. You've taught them that it's coming every week. And good things happen. So yes, advisors who are listening to this going, well, there's a jillion podcasts. You probably know the stats better than me, but it's like the modal number of podcasts, I think, is 1. And the mean number of podcasts is like 5. So it's like people start and then they stop and then they wring their hands about why it didn't work. Well, you didn't do it.
They didn't give it a chance. What would have
cadence.
happened exactly if you would have looked at your stats today, even on, because it's accretive, right? Your data set is, people will go back to episode 5, episode 17. The other, and again, I don't have the stat memorized here, but the average person that listens to podcasts, I think it's like the number's 12 or 15. They don't listen to one.
Yeah.
It's like a radio station. Podcasts are like, hey, do I want to hear rock? Do I want to hear, electronic dance beats? Am I into Latin today? What kind of mode am I channeling? Do I want acoustic? And so the same thing with podcasts. It's literally like flipping the dial of your TV and finding what you want. The other thing is like, how many people can access your website on an iWatch? That's very, very few. Podcast platforms now have data based on the device. And when I saw, I was like, iWatch 2%? That blew my mind, Daniel. Is somebody watching while they're walking, while they're hiking? And so by the virtue of you not having this as a content form and medium, you are excluding a percent of your population, whether you like it or not. Mm-hmm. How many cars now, smart cars, have CarPlay, podcast apps? How many people, again, if we surveyed our group right over here, when was the last time that somebody listened to a podcast here? I'm sure that, the answers to that question would reveal a lot of learning. So, you hear in my voice, I'm really passionate about advisors and people doing what you did. You're almost at 300 episodes. Mm-hmm. You're there. Are you doing it really for the numbers?
No.
Exactly.
It's the best part of my job. It lets me talk to interesting people like you, and it keeps my saw sharp, right? I mean, the act of having to put a podcast together puts me in proximity to some of the smartest people in the industry, great behavioral minds, and I learn a ton. And there's, all the stuff that I think, why people would assume I do a podcast. That's all ancillary to the fact that I get to talk to smart people all day. So it's a great blessing and a great positive in my life. And I've been on CNBC. I've done, articles in big, well-read publications and things. Nothing hits like a podcast.
That's right. And you're also, aren't you named? Aren't you the Think Advisor luminary? Aren't you also too recognized by them as a, standard deviations podcast, right? So you're so much more. Like, how many times have somebody listened and that you've changed a part of their life, or you've enabled them to make a better financial decision? It goes, again, produce great content. You do this with your heart, even preparing for today. This isn't something that you just like randomly take a chance with. It's engineered, it's precise, it's succinct. You do your research, you appreciate your guests. All of these things are around that. So I really hope that advisors, take a cue from you. It's not about the numbers.
Yeah.
It's about providing lifetime value, about getting your message across, and look at what it's done for you. This is just, you're just at the first inning, my dear. I know that you're a big St.Louis Cardinals fan. I saw you wearing the cap yesterday. You're in the first inning, Dr. Daniel Crosby.
Everyone listen to the passion in Tina's voice. Listen to me when I say everyone wants a 90-second media hit on CNBC or whatever, which is lovely and has its own benefits. But getting to spend an hour with someone in your ear, talking deeply about their expertise, whether through your podcast or whether through you appearing on someone else's podcast, there's a level of relational depth and connection on a podcast that just doesn't exist in any other medium, in my opinion. Okay, so Tina, do you remember back in the day? You're young, I'm old, but
I'm older than you.
We'll talk about back in the day when yearbooks used to do the thing where it was like most beautiful, most handsome, most likely to succeed. That's not PC anymore. That's been done away with, and I get the reasons why. But we're gonna do most likely to succeed superlatives for the world of digital marketing, social media, and podcasting. So here in the lightning round, I'm going to throw out a superlative, and you name someone from our community who exemplifies this superlative. You ready?
Oh God, this is going to be so.
It's going to be tough.
Going to be so hard. Can I open up my Twitter?
You can open up Twitter. Yeah,
Okay,
I'll allow it. This is an open notes test.
Okay. I'm subscribed to so many.
So most educational. Who's someone that's doing great educational content with their social presence?
Who is most educational with their so I don't have, believe it or not, I don't have an example of that. What I've done, I don't think there's one source. I think it comes from an array of people. What I do is this, though. When I find educational content and when I find people that I like, I have a Twitter list. And so I've got social FAs in my Twitter list.
Okay.
So my answer to most educational would be look at my Twitter list for social FAs and take the whole aggregate of that. I would say that I love your content. I love any content that directs me, that helps to make me smarter about things. I'm not a quant. I'm not a researcher. I appreciate what you bring to the industry. And so if you've taught me anything, a fact, a piece of work, something that I could read that's kind of bite-sized to me, I appreciate that. I would say the one person that obviously stands out for me is Michael Kitces, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I'll give Michael Kitces the nod on here. He is part of my social FAs. I will also, I'll say Craig Iskowitz, too, is doing a really good job. Gavin Spitzner is doing a really good job. So I would put them in your camp as well.
Okay, beautiful. Follow the list. That's, I created a reading list. I got asked so much what my favorite behavioral finance book. It was an impossible question to answer, so I just made a whole reading list and broke it down. So I'll allow it. We'll allow you to point people to the list. Okay, funny. Who's funny on FinTwit in social media? You
know what? I like Josh Brown.
Oh yeah.
I like Josh Brown. It's like those one-hit wonders. Like he just does it for me. He's been doing it for me for I think that his style, again, but when I read his tweets, Daniel, I could like almost hear him saying it, right? It fits him. You know it's on brand. You know it's really him.
Yeah, Josh Brown. I think Doug Boneparth for me
yes.
is one who's really killing
He is
it
also
with
too.
the funny
He's
game.
hilarious.
Yeah, he like Doug, love you, Doug. He does a real public service, I think, by making light of bear markets. Like, I mean, when things get so rugged, he's there making jokes about it, and it really helps kind of get me through. Visually appealing. Who has beautiful content? This could be, you know, we'll move beyond social. This could even be sort of branding writ large. Who has beautiful, appealing, visually appealing social presence?
DraftKings Sports.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and their handle is DKS Sportsbook. But let me give you guys all a secret, right? Because I want to be of value to people listening right now in this podcast. I have Twitter Blue right now, and so Twitter Blue allows me to bookmark my tweets and put them in a nice little organized folder. So anytime that I find something visually appealing, inspirational, something that, again, Dr. D'Amico, replicate, I put them in my Twitter folder. So I've got multiple folders around different themes, thematic approaches to content. This might be inspirational. This might be SaaS. This might be fintech. So the visually appealing, I think the secret is to look outside the vertical, see what sports are doing, and see where, if you had a magic wand and you weren't so hard on yourself, you know, what's possible. And again, get that, earmark it, right?
Yeah.
Put it in your swipe file, and get Twitter Blue so that you can have that swipe file. And then also too, so that when you have a tweet and you make a mistake, it gives you like a 10-second window that you're like, okay, I want to change that. Yeah.
So, you know, I think I don't know if you meant to do this, but it's a good kind of like, it's a nod to understanding, not that DraftKings is like the enemy, but like we have to be as good as the gaming folks, right? I mean,
Right.
We in personal finance and investing, we know gambling is coming with great content, right? Like we know there's people who are trying to induce our clients to spend their money or to you know, gamble their money, that are going to be coming with really compelling stuff. And if we're not equally compelling, we lose, right? I mean, we have to be just as good. So I think that's a great one. You know, I see a lot of value in social media for exposing myself to ideas that I don't necessarily agree with, or people that are sort of outside of my immediate circle. Is there a news source or a social account like that for you that helps just, you know, prompt your thinking or take a contrarian viewpoint?
Sure. So again, you know, I'm a marketer. If I have time, I'm going to read about media. Yes, I'll pick up the Barons on the weekend, but again, I'm really fascinated. So a lot of the people that I follow are thought leaders in media and marketing. So I would say there's 3 people that I follow that I love. Gary Vee. God, I mean, Gary Vee's been my hero for forever now. I was lucky enough to get a tour of his office at Hudson Yards. That was the most magical place ever. David Meerman Scott, DM Scott, he's been my book coach since last year. We're coming out with a book next year on social media. I think David Meerman Scott also presents a lot of, he's taught me ways to think and ways to even evaluate. It's made me a better communicator, and ways to evaluate my own social media. You know, seeing that there could be different interpretations, really taking my time with that. And then I would say Seth Godin, who is the marketing god of all things. He's really good to push forth a thought, a point of view that gets you, that you stop in your tracks and you're like, wow, actually, you know, he's right.
Well, you know, I love, you know, what you said about Seth Godin. I think there's at least 2 ways to use social media. One is to create an echo chamber, right? One is to insulate yourself from outside viewpoints or contrarian viewpoints by surrounding yourself with like-minded people who only tweet or, you know, write or talk about the things that you already agree with, and sort of engineering this false sense of consensus that I think, you know, if I can get sort of political for a moment, is actually really harming our country. Like we're more polarized than we've ever been before. And I think part of the reason that's the case is because we're self-selecting into groups that don't challenge us. But I think you can also follow people on social media who deepen your thinking, you know, who cause you to question your most cherished ideas, who make you, like Seth Godin does for you, sort of pause and go, like maybe I'm looking at this differently. So I hope people will use it the way that you clearly do, to deepen their understanding of things they don't know, to deepen their understanding of places where they're even quite expert, and surround themselves with differing viewpoints. Tina, you're awesome. Your passion for this work is apparent in the way that you talk about it. We're doing a home and away here at Pew, so I'm excited to be a guest on your podcast tomorrow. We're very excited for that. Very, very great questions. But if people want to learn more about this passion, if they want to learn more about you and your work and C-suite, where can they follow you and learn more?
I think the best place to follow me would be on LinkedIn, and please subscribe to my newsletter, because I've got a lot of our guests. I can't wait to put your broadcast and record your broadcast. Thank you again for making the time to be on our episode. That's where you're going to get some of our written content, and then you'll get important links. So come on LinkedIn. Of course, I would love some more Twitter followers to get to Daniel's 33,000 and a blue check mark.
Let's get her more than 80. What was my number? 87. Let's get her more from this podcast than I got from my tweet. Yeah. What's your Twitter handle?
Twitter is Tina C Powell. Carmela, my grandmother, too. Also, too, I want to wish you a happy birthday. Happy belated. I think your birthday was a couple weeks ago?
No, it's October. Do I have it wrong
okay, it's
somewhere?
October. No, I had it wrong. That's really good. Okay, it's October. I know it's coming up. Are you Scorpio or Libra?
I'm Libra. You can tell by how balanced.
Yes, exactly.
You can tell
That's
by how
right.
balanced I am.
You can tell what side of the coin I'm on, right? I'm an October birthday, too. All Scorpio, Daniel. This has been amazing. Thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you. Everyone go follow Tina, see what the passion's all about. Tina, thank you so much for all you do for us, and thanks for sharing your wisdom today.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to Standard Deviations. If you can't wait till next week for more behavioral finance insights, visit www.orion.com. All opinions expressed by Dr. Daniel Crosby and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of or endorsement by Orion and its affiliates, subsidiaries, and employees. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for legal, tax, and investment decisions. The opinions are based upon information the participants consider reliable.